guys, today we're going to multiply fractions, so fractions by fractions. And then we want to make sure our answer's in simplest form, and we're going to look at those keywords to let us know that we are actually multiplying these fractions. So that is your title for today. All right, so let's get the first examples here. So when multiplying fractions, you want to multiply just like we did the other day. Multiply the top, multiply the bottom. We want to make sure it's in simplest form. If you struggle with simplifying, I always tell kids to try to cut it in half. If both of them cut in half perfectly, meaning they don't have a remainder, then you're good. You could divide by 2, divide by 2, divide by 2. The more you know your facts, the better it is. If that doesn't work, try 3 for both of them, the numerator and the denominator, or 5, and so on and so forth. Typically, after that, you can kind of get to where it is in simplest form. So example 1, if I take 3/4 and I multiply it by 5/6, there is a way to show this in a visual. To me, it is very, very confusing. Okay, so I'm just going to show you this way here. So what do? We multiply the top. So 3 times 5 is the numerators, 4 times 6 is the denominators. Again, for multiplication, you do not have to have a common denominator, only for addition and subtraction. So what do we get? We have 15 over 24. Okay? So if I think about this, if you know your facts, this becomes really, really, really easy. Are these both even? They're not. So dividing by 2 is not going to work. If I do know my facts, then I know that if I divide the top by 3 and cut the bottom into thirds, that they're both going to work out without a remainder. So this would become 15 divided by 3 is 5, and 24 divided by 3 is 8. And if you know anything, 5 and 8 have nothing in common other than 1. So this answer in simplest form is 5/8. So the goal is to simplify it. All right, next one. Same thing again. I'm going to multiply the tops, 1/5 times 2/3. Multiply the bottoms, 5 times 3. So 2 times 1 is 2 over 15. They're not even. Both of them are not even, so I cannot divide by 2. And that's really it. This is already simplified. Okay. All right. So let's look at here. Let's do a couple more, and I want to show you that this can work and how to simplify if you struggle with that. So this right here, I would do 3 times 2, which is 6. 4 times 5, which is 20. So this time that they are both even, so if they are even, I can cut them both in half. So I can at least cut them in half. So half of 6 is 3. Half of 20 is 10. And then you should notice 3 and 10 have nothing in common. So there you go. Okay. There is another way to do this. And if you'd like to see that, I'll show you right over here. If I look at these numbers, so 3 times 2 and 4 times 5. For a lot of people, this is confusing. I use it all the time. If I look at 2 and 4 have something in common, right? I could divide both of those by 2. So if I divide this by 2, I get 1. If I divide this by 2, I get 2. Now, do you see where that answer comes from? 3 times 1, which is 3, and 2 times 5, which is 10. That is another way that you can do it. Okay? It's called cross product simplification. Some people use it. Do you have to? Absolutely not. Okay. So next one here, this would be 18 over 30. Okay. So again, if you struggle, are they both even? Yes. I know the biggest one. I know the greatest common factor that they share. The biggest number you can divide both of those by is actually 6. So if you know that the GCF for these two is 6, you could get this done in pretty much 1 to 2 steps. But let's say you don't know that, okay? So let's say you know, I at least cut it in half because they're both even, right? Half of 18 is 9. Half of 30 is 15, okay? Well, then I ask myself, okay, they're not both even, so what do I do? So they're not both even. Let's see if I can divide by 3. Oh, wait, 9 works. 9 I can divide by 3, and 15 I can divide by 3. So if I divide the top and the bottom into thirds, 9 divided by 3 is 3, and 15 divided by 3 is 5. And then I'm done because there is nothing in common with these two. This is the way that you would go if the GCF is unknown. If you don't really know what the greatest common factor is, that would be the way that you do it. However, some of you do know. So let's say you had 18 over 30 and you knew right off the bat you could cut it into 6 parts. 18 cut into 6 parts gives me 3. 30 cut into 6 parts gives me 5. So this is done in basically one step versus this is done in a couple steps. Again, it doesn't matter, you still come up with the same solution. So it is totally fine either way, okay? What's easier is knowing your facts, knowing your greatest common factors. So like for this one, you can do the same thing. So if I look at here, I got 5 times 4, which is 20. 6 times 7, which is 42. Okay? Now, some of you are only going to see, okay, they're even. Like, I can at least divide by 2. Some of you go, okay, well, maybe another number that would be bigger would work. Would 4 work? 4 wouldn't work. I'm thinking about like multiples of 420. Would 5 work? 5 wouldn't work. So maybe it is just 2. So let's cut it in half. Half of 20 is 10, and half of 42. So if you don't know what 42 and take half of that, that's 20. 21. 10 and 21. Now you ask yourself, is there anything in common there? First of all, they're not even. Both of them are not even. I can't divide 10 by 3. I can't divide 21 by 5. And if you know your facts of 21, so the only numbers I can divide 21 is 1, 3, 7, and 21. And none of these work for this one. So guess what? That is your answer. Okay. So again, there are ways to go about this. Okay. Looking at some problems on your own. Go ahead and try these, please. Pause the video. Okay, so the answers that you got for the first one, regardless whether you did divide by 2, then divide by 3, you would have got 1/6. Or if you knew the biggest number you could divide both of those by, which was actually 12, I could have got it done in one step, which is still 1/6. So it doesn't matter. This one, you originally had 10/18, but the only thing you can divide by is 2, and that's it. All you can do is cut it in half. Okay, the ones that are harder are these word problems. So knowing, again, how do I know it's multiplication versus something else? So let's think about it this way. Josiah spent 3/4 of her allowance at the mall on clothes. Of the money she spent at the mall, half was spent on shoes. I don't want to know the actual amount because they didn't tell me how much she had, right? What part of her allowance did Josiah spend on shoes? So we don't know how much she had. We just know she spent 3/4 of her allowance at the mall. Okay, so she didn't spend all of her money. Okay, so 3/4 of her allowance. So 3/4 of her allowance. And then it says of the money she spent at the mall. So of this 3/4, maybe it was $10, maybe $100, we don't know. Of the money that she spent at the mall, so this is what she spent at the mall, this is the 3/4 of what she spent at the mall, half was spent specifically on shoes. So half of that money was on shoes. So out of all the money she had, what did she spend from the mall specifically on shoes? Well, 3/4 of her allowance she spent, and she spent half of that on shoes. So if you think about it, all you have to do is multiply those two. Because 3/4 times a half would be 3/8. So 3/8 of her allowance was spent on shoes. But let's put that in perspective. Let's say Josiah had, how much money? Let's say $100, okay? So let's say her allowance was $100, okay? What's 3/4 of 100? Well, 3/4, So that would be take 3/4 of 100. Let me do right below here. So 3/4 of 100 would be 300 over 4. Or you could think about it this way, it would be basically take 100 divided by 4. So there's $25, right? Times 3, which would be $75. Okay, so $75 she spent from her allowance on at the mall. Okay, half of this, out of the $75 that she spent at the mall, half of it was spent on shoes. So if I cut this in half, 75 cut in half, that means she spent 37.5, which would be $37.50 specifically out of $100 was spent on those shoes. Hopefully that makes sense when we put in a number. I didn't know what she meant, what she spent. I just am trying to make it relevant. So let's look at another one. Mrs. Edwards has a community coloring box. Of course I do. Although we can't share it now this year because COVID. But 2/5 of the coloring supplies are crayons. So out of all my supplies, 2/5 of this box, so whatever is in this box is crayons. 2/5 of it is crayons specifically. So 2/5 of the box is my crayons. Of the crayons, so of my beautiful supply of crayons, 1/8 of them are broken. So out of all of these, 1/8 are broken. What fraction, so 1/8 are broken. Oopsies. Wow. Roxanne, apparently. What fraction of the supplies are broken? So out of all my supplies, so I have coloring pencils, markers, crayons, whatever in that box, so all of that's in there. 2/5 of them are specifically crayons, and out of all my crayons, 1/8 of them are broken. So I got a fraction of a fraction, so I got a smaller amount, smaller amount, smaller amount. So I have a very, very small amount that's actually broken that are specifically crayons. So think about it this way. I have 2/5 of this, of whatever, I don't know how many supplies, I didn't give you a number, of those are the crayons, and of the crayons, 1/8 are broken. So this would give me 2/40, which if I cut it in half, I get 1/20, not 20, 1/20. So 1/20 out of all the supplies are crayons that are broken. So let's put it into perspective. Let's say I had 100 items in the box. So what would be this? If I did 2/5 times 100 over 1, that would be 200 over 5, which would be 40. 40 items are crayons. Of my 40, so 1/8 of them are broken. 1/8 of the 40 crayons, because these are my crayons, are broken. Well, what's 40 cut in 8 pieces? 5 of them are broken. So out of all the supplies, out of 100, only 5 of them are crayons that are broken. So very, very, very small amount. And hopefully that makes sense. One of the most common ones they're thinking about, I like this one because it's more of a visual. So let's say we used to have Miss Arena. So Miss Arena and Brun's class share a bulletin board. So there's a bulletin board. If Mrs. Arena class uses 3/5 of their half to display their test, what fraction of the bulletin board is used to display Arena's test? So they use 3/5 of their half. So clearly, to be fair, they split the board in half. So this side is Arena, and this side is Miss Brun. And Arena's class uses 3/5 of their half. Okay, 3/5 of their half. So if I take this and cut it into 5 pieces, 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 lines make 5 pieces. 3 of these are specifically tests. So how many X's do I have? 3, right? Out of how many total how many total sections? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 3/10. 3/10 are using specifically out of the whole thing is Miss Arena side, and 3 of those are specifically out of the 10 are tests. So let's see if that makes sense to you. If I did 3/5 of their half, 3/5 of their half does give me 3/10. This is just showing you it is. So hopefully that is starting to make some sense. So this is kind of a review from yesterday. So if I say here, the table shows the votes for each student who ran for student council. So we have every year a lot of kids run for student council. And let's say there's 180 students voted. So they actually filled out and voted. Fill in the table to show the number of votes for each student. So I know there's 180 students. This is the fraction of the votes. Okay. What I have to know is that this has to add up to 180. So I should be getting numbers. So how do I know, how can I find out how many people voted for David? 1/5 of the kids voted for David. So you would do 1/5 of 180. And then you would do the same thing going down. So go ahead and pause the video and see if we come up with the same answers here. Should have got 36 people voted for David. If you notice, this is 1/5 for David. Tiffany was 2/5, so all you got to do is double that up. So you didn't have to do all of that. If you know 1/10 of 180 is 18, well, it will be 3/10. Just do 18 times 3. That's also another way you could have done that. But if you do add these up, they do add up to 180 because that has to account for all the students. Okay. All right, so this is the end of the lesson. Go ahead and get started on today's practice assessment. See you tomorrow.